Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. So, full disclosure, this is one of those times where I'm recording at the 11th hour. Like many of you, I work full time. I have family responsibilities. I'm not one of these people recording podcasts at, 10:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. Someone will have to explain to me how that works. But anyway, I'm doing this at the 11th hour. So I'm going to attempt to do this in one take. I have my notes in front of me and some bullet points. I know what I'm going to talk about. We have some interesting topics. I'll talk a little bit about the club, and then we have a cool mailbag segment. And then I'll talk about some thoughts on playing in weekend events or why I'm probably not going to do that at all. I said I might go back to it, but now I'm convinced probably not going to happen. But anyway, I'm going to do this in one take. So that's really not my style. So if there's like an awkward pause here or there, that type of thing, some dead air, please forgive me just for this week, but I think we'll be okay. And it's funny, we had a family event this evening out east and had a really, really good time. And as I'm driving home, I was just thinking about this and I'm like, should I really just do this or should I just wait? But I kind of want to keep the release schedule because this is only like the third or fourth episode after the break we took for the summer. But then I'm thinking there are podcasts, even some chess podcasts that do this every week. They just kind of host and post. They host and post. There's really no editing. And I'm like, if other, and it's not just chess. I mean, there's plenty of other types of podcasts out there, whatever it is, news or other hobbies or whatever it is. But there's plenty of independent podcasts out there where they're not really editing. They're just kind of recording or, like I say, host and post, and that's it. We record it, we post it, we slap on an intro, and then we're done. So if they're doing it every week, I figure I can get away with it once in a while. I mean, there's one chess podcast now, I think, that's actually using AI to edit, which it can be annoying to listen to because the sentences get cut off very abruptly, or the transition from one speaker to another is just not good. It has like these awkward cutoffs. It has almost like a very choppy, abrupt sound to it. I tried using it myself a few times on this podcast just to see what it was about, and yeah, never again. So I edit manually. I mean, it might get to a point where the AI editing is so good you can't tell, but we're definitely not there yet as I record this in the fall of 2025. So I'm going straight through, except for maybe a couple of times. I'm really not going to hit the pause button. I'm just going to go straight through. So like I said, an awkward pause here or there. I'll ask for your indulgence just for this week, but I think we'll be okay. I'm old. I've been around a long time. I think I can do this. So here we go. So let's talk about the club first, some interesting things. So number one is I'm seeing in a lot of games, some of my own as well, F4, the Birds opening. We've spoken about that on the podcast a number of times. I did an episode on it when Anthony Arena was a guest a few weeks ago. We were discussing it, but I don't know why F4 is so popular. Maybe you can tell me. I mean, I'm not a big social media person, so I don't know if there was something on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or something, but F4, I'm seeing a lot of it as I observe games around the club. I'm facing it a few times myself. So there's this sort of resurgence of the Birds opening. I don't know if a famous YouTuber spoke about it or if there's a course, or I don't know if I don't know, did Magnus or somebody play it and now everybody wants to do it? I don't really know. If someone knows why, let me know. But the Birds opening apparently is where it's at now because I'm seeing a lot of it. And it's not a bad opening. I mean, I guess it's good to play if you have the white pieces and your opponent is very booked up and is expecting something like E4 or D4. And if you know they're the type to prep, against you, f4 could be a nice little surprise. But interesting thing there. Now let me talk about my game this week. So I was white. I was playing a London, and I played a typical London because if you remember the week before, I tried a variation of the French, and I'm like, this week I'm just sticking with what I know. I don't care if they prepped against it. Turns out I won the game, but how I won was interesting. So it was a London. He played as black, where you try to get in E5, right? He was trying to get in E5, which is typical. White tries to prevent that. Very often he'll put his knight there. So he was doing the sort of D6, knight D7, that idea to try to control E5 and get the push in. And I didn't allow him to do it. I thought I played well. In fact, he fiend kettoed his light squared bishop on B7, and then I hit him with A4. That's like a really nice idea in the London, is when black fiend shadows, you go for A4 because a lot of players with the black pieces don't know how to handle it. That seemed to throw him off a bit. But here's how I won the game. Very, very interesting. I didn't expect this. So a common idea in the London, white has that London bishop on F4, and black will have a piece on F6. And he'll often go knight F6 to H5 to kind of hunt down the bishop on F4. Now, if he's threatening to do that, usually at some point before that, black will play H3. Usually after white plays, or rather black plays E6, white will play H3 just to give the dark squared bishop a place to run. So I did that, and he did try chasing my bishop, so I tucked it away on H2. So my dark squared bishop is on H2, and it's attacking his pawn on D6. Okay, and that's a common way to play against the London is black. You hold off on playing D5 with your D pawn. I often play that way myself, especially if you like sort of a hedgehog setup. So his pawn's on D6, my bishop on H2 is attacking it. His dark squared bishop is on E7 protecting it. But it was the type of situation where those pieces were on those same squares for a long time. So my bishop is kind of hidden away on H2, attacking his D6 pawn. And it got to a point later in the game. I'm obviously not going to discuss specific moves, but we had a position where I was able to advance my C pawn to C4, and my queenside pawns were advancing nicely. I had a little bit of an initiative there. And then his queen was attacking an isolated pawn I had on, I think it was D4, okay? Or not isolated, I shouldn't say that, but it wasn't defended by another pawn. So what he decided to do, his bishop, which was defending that D6 pawn, he decides to move it back so he can double up with the queen. But what failed to happen, this is so common, he completely forgot that my bishop that was tucked away on H2 was attacking it. And that often happens when there's a piece attacking another piece that's defended, but it's been that way for a while because you're moving elsewhere on the board. You just forget. It was simply an oversight. So he moves his bishop back, and he missed that it hung the pawn. Now, of course, I played correctly. I took my time because he can be a slippery player. And I'm like, is this some kind of trap? And I'm looking, I'm like, no. I'm like, can he do this? No, it's not a trap. This dude just hung a pawn. But the reason that it was so strong for me, it was the type of thing after I win the pawn, I also have a better position in general. I have some terrific squares I'm threatening with my bishop. My pawns are better. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are times you drop a pawn, but it's almost inconsequential because there's so much else going on. Not this position. This was one of those sort of momentum positions where after I win the pawn, I'm also much better. But here's the interesting thing. He hangs the pawn. I go bishop takes pawn, and then he whips out a move right away. It was almost like a frustration type of move, like, whatever. He just whipped something out. And I saw that I could then move my bishop to force some trades, which is going to help me there. And I have a much better end game. But I wanted to take my time and look. So he makes this move real fast. And as I'm thinking, he just tips his king. And I was pretty surprised. And he was like, yeah, I made a mistake there. That was terrible. And, I said to him, I don't like to, and when people are frustrated if you win, I don't know, like, do I say something or not? Because some people, it's like, you'll win the game. Like, don't ever say this. Like if you win a game and someone resigns, don't ever say like, oh, thank you for the game. I really enjoyed that. Like, don't be an idiot. If I win and I see someone is maybe a little frustrated, I'll do I shake? You know what I'm saying? I don't want to like belabor the point and make it worse. Like, do I just you know what I'm saying? So it was kind of thing like, I don't know if I should say something right now, but he resigned and then he was really cool though. He's like, yeah, that was a mistake. I don't know why I did that. And then I said, it was kind of an opening there. I'm like, I'm curious. I'm like, you still have some play here. Like it's playable. I know him better. He's just like, yeah. And it goes to show you that's kind of an very old school, at least in my view, this is my interpretation. That's kind of an old school mentality because I guess his thinking was he knew he lost a pawn and he was worse. He just didn't feel like struggling and fighting back the whole game. Or some of these guys, they just kind of beat themselves up. I definitely thought it was a little bit of a premature resignation. I was surprised. And to be honest, that's the first time I've had someone resign like that against me in a very long time, where they make, say, a 1 question mark blunder rather than a 2 question mark blunder, and they resign. I mean, it's been, I can't even remember the last time somebody resigned that way. But I guess that's how some players are, or maybe he was just really frustrated. Maybe he's a bit of a perfectionist. Very nice guy, but I thought, the queens were still on the board. He still could have kind of mixed it up a little bit. I mean, even though I was winning, I still need to play chess. It wasn't like I could just like keep one eye open and the game's going to win itself. But you're going to find, especially those of you new to tournaments, occasionally there are going to be players who do that where they will resign in a way that you're going to think is premature. It does happen. So that was an interesting thing there. I didn't expect that. Now, if he didn't resign and he played on, I'm pretty confident I would have won because it was a strong position. But you know what? You never know. I've had positions like that before where it's very easy to drop the ball, and I've done that. All right. So next thing at the club. There was one game that was in progress towards the end, and I noticed someone had like their phone right by the game. So my game was done by then, and I passed by. I'm like looking at their phone because you have to understand if I'm, directing, I kind of have to be aware of, what's going on. Like, sometimes if a child is playing and the parent is like hovering around the board a little too close, I have to check for that just to make sure there's nothing nefarious going on. But this person had their phone and they had the game that was in progress on their phone on an engine. Now, I know the player, so I knew he was just following it. But, I said to him, like, hey, you got to shut that off. You can't have a phone on with an engine, especially one of the games that are in progress. I mean, I was a little surprised he did that. No big deal. It wasn't done maliciously. I've seen players do this before. It was completely innocent. But I said, you can't do that because the problem is, even though he was just doing it for educational purposes to maybe learn from it, the problem is that's live, that's online. It's not so much I was worried that it could be hacked, but let's say a friend of one of the players walks by and looks over his shoulder and notices. I mean, there's all sorts of potential problems. You're opening a can of worms with this. So I said, yeah, you can't do that. And I've had to tell players this before. Like, you can't have a chess engine open on your phone, like following a game in a tournament. There was one club, this was many years ago when I was sort of cutting my teeth as a club player. I wasn't a tournament director yet. I wasn't running a club, where the TD told everyone you cannot even have laptops in the tournament hall, because what would happen is parents or spectators, if they were in the tournament hall, they would have their laptops and they would do work and stuff. I mean, I see that all the time. Like, for some of the younger kids who don't drive yet, their parents will come with them and they'll have a laptop open. They'll be doing like work emails or spreadsheets for work, whatever it is, and not a big deal. But from this other club, apparently, I didn't get the whole story. There must have been an issue where someone thought maybe the parent had the game on the computer with an engine running, something like that. So he just said, you know what, no more laptops in the tournament hall, which makes sense. That's a legitimate rule. If you see it's a problem, that's something that you might have to institute. But you cannot, I'm sure every tournament director would agree with me, you cannot follow a game, even if it's not your game, even if you don't know the players, even if you're kind of hiding the view of your phone. You can't have a current game in progress in the tournament hall on your phone with an engine just to follow it because you're curious. Because then also, you might then make a face if someone makes a good or a bad move. It's just not, you just can't do that. It's just too many problems. And especially with all the cheating and accusations of cheating, it's not something you can do. But like I said, I know it wasn't done maliciously in this case, because some of the younger players, they might think, oh, everything's with the phone now, no big deal. But that is actually a very big deal. So yeah, no engines on your phone in the tournament hall. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. Okay, that's it for the club business. Now let's jump into the listener mailbag. All right, our first message is from Michael. He wrote in about two different things. I'm just going to talk about one, so I did edit this a little bit. And he says, "Hi from Sweden. Thanks for a great and personal podcast. Regarding cheating and how I view playing, I have often been accused of cheating by other players, not by chess.com. I'm 1470 rapid over the board, but only 1100 to 1200 on chess.com. I take OTB chess seriously. Maybe it's immoral, but I see online chess as relaxing and a bit of fun. I unwind with it after a hard work day, playing when I'm tired or while I watch TV. Every now and then, when I'm not tired from work, I concentrate and take it seriously, usually during the weekend. I can beat players around 1600 to 1700, and that's when they often think I'm cheating. Maybe there are more people like me, and cheating is a bit less widespread than people think, just a thought. Maybe I'm destroying the system, but both types are valuable for me, and I don't think I could restrain myself from playing when I quote-unquote should not. I have also met adult improvers, such as myself, who play far too little because they only play when conditions are quote-unquote perfect. They think they should play seriously or not play. They haven't got a chance to try their openings multiple times and to start to recognize patterns and situations. That requires a lot of games, so they don't improve. If you have kids and a busy life, I think quote-unquote sloppy games have a value. There is no other way to get the volume up. Hope you find some of this interesting. I started playing 4 years ago when I was 44, and my life goal is to reach 1600 over the board." And then he sent a follow-up email, and he said, "Just to clarify my last email, I do play serious games in full concentration that I analyze. These are the games you learn most from. These are the games you learn the most from, and they are important. But I think you need both. As an example, a fellow late 40s club member just quit chess. We didn't have an ongoing tournament twice a month in the club." Oh, he says we have an ongoing tournament twice a month in the club. He was complaining that he didn't improve. I sometimes asked him if he had played since last time. He said he had been busy and tired, and if he could not give it his all, there's no point playing, as is often the advice. I'm just saying that I think that most adult improvers do not have the time to play enough games, quote unquote, the right way in order to improve. I believe you have to test your opening multiple times, face certain situations multiple times, have your mistakes punished multiple times, etc., to learn. While sloppy games are not ideal, they serve a purpose other than fun and relaxation and are far better than nothing. Regards, Michael. Well, Michael, thanks for your email. I was actually thinking about this the other day. This is a great point. I've spoken about this before a little bit, which is, should you play chess when you're 100% into it, when you're fully concentrating, either that or just don't bother at all. And it's funny. And my response would be, you have to do what works for you. For many people like yourself, they do have sort of two approaches where they just kind of play casually to like sort of let off steam after work. They have fun. And then they play in another mode where they take it really, really seriously. And like you said, the problem is when you do that, when you take it seriously and you beat a higher rated player as opposed to when you don't, then it's like, oh, well, why is your playing so inconsistent? Why are you now beating a higher rated opponent and people think you're cheating? I get it. But a lot of people agree with you. Now, I know what many people do. Now, don't hold me to this, but I'm pretty sure on most of the major servers like Lichess and chess.com, I think especially chess.com, I believe you're technically not supposed to have more than one account, but everybody does it anyway. It's usually just streamers. I think if you're a streamer and you're doing like a speed run, like if you want multiple accounts, you can get it on maybe chess.com, but they have to give you permission. But I believe the rule is, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're supposed to have multiple accounts. But again, people do it anyway. It's like apparently the worst kept secret in online chess. And what some people do, Michael, is kind of what you explained. They have a quote unquote fun account and then a serious account. Some people jokingly refer to the fun account, colloquially as like their drunk account. It's after work. They just want to let off steam. They want to have a drink. They'll play on that account. But then when they take it seriously, they'll play on their other account. But then I've heard some people on the fun account, they actually have a higher rating because I guess they're just so relaxed, Anyway, but the idea of having like sort of a fun account and a serious account, that's definitely a thing. I've heard it before. And I would say this, if it works for you, then do it. Because you're right. You get in a lot of reps and a lot of volume that way. Now, for me, I'm going to admit something. I am one of those people where if I'm not fully concentrating and into it, it's just not worth it for me. Now that's for me. For you and many others, your method of the two types of games, it works perfectly well. And if it's helping you, stick with it. For me, I've tried that not where I had different accounts, but where I tried to say, all right, I'm just going to do this, whatever. Let's say this time control will be my quote unquote fun time control. This time control will be my serious time control. It never worked out because if I play knowing I'm not 100%, then it's like I get frustrated. And, I am one of those people. Like you have that line in there, you've met adult improvers such as myself who play too little because they only play when conditions are perfect. They think they should play seriously or not play. That kind of is me. I admit that. Now, I'm pretty much just playing over the board. I haven't played online in quite a while, and I'm kind of liking that. Now, if you recall, I said back in the early spring I was going to take the summer off from playing online, but I'm actually still in that mode just because I'm liking it. I'm playing just over the board and analyzing my game, studying here and there. So that works for me. But other people like yourself, they get in those quote unquote sloppy games and the quote unquote perfect games, and it works well. So if that dual system is working for you, I think that's great. For a lot of people, it does. For me, I'm sort of like all or nothing, and that works for me. So I think it's definitely personal preference and an individual thing, but you're certainly right. I mean, the fewer games you play, the less experience you're going to get in, but you have to weigh that against the fact that, if you're not giving it 100%, is that going to bother you? But a very interesting discussion philosophically sort of about chess improvement. So thanks, Michael, for chiming in. I really appreciate it. Our next message is from Nahuel, who bought us 2 coffees on our Buy Me a Coffee page. We appreciate it. That's our support platform. If you're interested in supporting the show, you can check out our Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. It's just a way to support the show, to say thank you. I do not put any content behind a paywall. It's not expected. I don't say things like, if you want to keep getting the same content you've been getting, make sure you support the show. I need to keep the lights on. If you want to keep, I don't do that. All right. I do not put any content behind a paywall. If I ever did, I used to have a Patreon. If I ever went back to it, it would be more like perks in terms of like maybe like, early releases or things like that. But I'm not a big fan on having, let's say, bonus episodes behind a paywall. I don't think that's going to change. But anyhow, thank you, Noel, for the 2 coffees. And this is what he writes. Hi, Neil. First, thanks for such a thoroughly enjoyable podcast. One area where I struggle, 1650 rated, is pawn breaks and levers. I'm going to take a sip of water. Hold on. All right, remember I said one take, so we're going straight through. So bear with me. He says, I'm aware of thematic breaks on openings, for example, F6 or C6 in the French, but beyond openings, I'm usually unsure when to go for a pawn break. Perhaps you can discuss general guidelines in the podcast. Alternatively, ideas about how to deal with isolated, double, and hanging pawns for both sides could be interesting. P.S. I'm impressed and grateful for the recording quality, particularly the volume. I cycle to work and I wear bone-conducting headphones. They don't cover the ear, so I can hear the traffic. The audio quality has to be solid for me to listen to a podcast. Too many are recorded at low volume or with mediocre sound, which makes them hard to play on my commute. The Chess Angle ranks among the best when it comes to audio quality. Well, thank you, Noel, again for the coffees. Now, I really appreciate the comment about the recording quality. I really do appreciate that because I do try to put, especially lately, I mean, obviously when I first started the pod, maybe the first 10 or 20 episodes, obviously I'm getting my feet wet, but now that we're kind of established, yes, I do put as much effort into the recording quality as I do the content. So I appreciate that. I do normalize the volume. I do have good equipment. I think that's important. I agree with you. A lot of chess podcasts don't do that, including some chess podcasts, if I'm being honest, or there'll be like multiple speakers or multiple hosts and everyone's volume is different. Like what you're referring to is called volume normalization, where like everyone should be the same. I also just set the volume to the industry standard in general, but I appreciate that because I agree with you. Good audio is very, very important. You don't want to have to like adjust the volume for different speakers, and you don't want to have to like either crank your volume all the way up or all the way down. So I do put a lot of thought into that. And, unfortunately, it's not just chess. This is podcasts in general. A lot of independent podcasts don't do that. As I said earlier, they just kind of host and post and, bim, boom, bam, we recorded it, here it is. And the truth is because, editing and doing that type of stuff, it is a pain. Now, it's funny. I know I said I'm not sort of editing the content this week because I'm going straight through, but you can believe I'm going to post-process the sound, which is what you were referring to. I always do. I'm not going to put something out there unless the recording quality is good. Sometimes it's a challenge with guests. With my guest recordings, sometimes that's tough because, post-processing is not a magic wand. I mean, if I have a guest who doesn't have an external microphone, which is probably most guests, unless they're into content creation themselves, most people are not going to have an external microphone. The microphone that is built into the computer is generally not that good. I mean, some of them are actually not bad, but between that, if their internet isn't good or if they're not close to the mic, like a lot of people with a microphone, they think they can keep it like 5 feet away, like it doesn't work that way. Or if they have a microphone, it's like this cheap condenser microphone that like picks up like everything, like a mouse could burp a half a mile away, it's going to pick it up. But anyway, I could go on a rabbit hole about the audio for a while, but I appreciate that. So I do put a lot of effort into that. So I'm glad you enjoy it. Now, as far as pawn levers, I actually thought about doing an episode on pawn levers, but I decided that for audio only, that was going to be a little too cumbersome. But here's what I'm going to recommend. The book that I'm always talking about, The Amateur's Mind, he has a chapter in there called The Confusing Subject of Pawn Structure. I think that's what it's called. It's outstanding. That chapter in The Amateur's Mind by Jeremy Silman on pawn structure, it's probably the best sort of treatise like standalone explanation of pawn levers that I've ever seen or I've ever read. So definitely check that out. I think that's a really good place to start. And thanks so much for your email and the coffees. Next, also from Buy Me a Coffee, he bought us one coffee. We really appreciate it. This is from Rick. He says, thank you for your amazing podcast. I love that it is aimed at people like me. I have been playing tournament chess on and off since 1975. Your down-to-earth and practical advice is top-notch. One of my biggest takeaways was what to do when you were in a better position and you have no clear path to victory. Your suggestion was to simply make moves that either maintain your advantage or slightly improve it, and the chances are your opponent will err. Great stuff. Yes. The sort of nothing moves or adequate moves or sometimes waiting moves, those are so valuable. If I were to write a book on chess or like my biography of chess, it would probably be called like, waiting moves or something like that. It's just very, very effective. In fact, the idea of playing adequate moves, I'm going to be doing another standalone episode about that. Something happened at the club in another game regarding always looking for the best move that inspired me to do another episode. That should be pretty cool. That's going to be coming up. But adequate moves are very, very powerful. If you see a good move and it's adequate, don't stress about playing the perfect move. You're right. It's very, very effective at this level. So thank you so much, Rick. I really appreciate it. And our final email this week is from Justin. And he says, hi, Neil. I'm a big fan of the show and have listened to every episode at least once. I just saw a clip of Magnus reevaluating the queen as being worth 10 points based on chess engine information. This sparked a thought that are the values of the pieces like 1 point for a pawn, 3 for a knight and a bishop, 9 for the queen, and 4 for the relative usefulness of a king in the endgame, are those fluid at different rating levels? Well, interesting question, Justin. I think, I'll answer it this way. Like they say there's 3 points for a knight or a bishop. It really depends on the position and how active the piece is. Like a knight on the 6th rank that has a secure outpost that can't be knocked away, that's probably worth as much or more than a rook. That's actually what most chess theory states as far as positional ideas, right? A knight on a secure outpost on the 6th rank where it controls a zillion squares, that's at least worth 4 or 5 points instead of 3. A bishop that's very active on the diagonal could be 3 points. Now, some people also have said, just generally speaking, that a bishop should be worth 3.5 points and a knight 3 points. I think that is the dumbest thing on the planet. I don't agree at all. The whole idea that bishops are more valuable than knights. It depends on the position. If it's an open position and it's an endgame and there's pawns on both sides of the board, yeah, then the bishop's going to be more valuable. If it's a closed endgame where the pawns are locked, the knight's usually more valuable. But I'll say this. I would argue that knights could be more valuable than bishop. Knights are just nasty. They're tricky pieces. Those knight forks in those endgames, and the knight is also a very nasty attacking piece, like a knight and a queen together. That's one of the most lethal combinations in chess. So in that instance, the knight's going to be worth more. So it really depends. Now, queens, again, it depends on if it's attacking. Now, in a queen endgame, which is my least favorite, like queen and pawn endgames, those are worse. Like everyone's like, oh, rook and pawn endgames, those are just so difficult. I'll take that any day. Queen and pawn endings, oh my God, I can't stand those. I can play them, but I hate them because everything is like, stalemate and check. And then if you go on the offensive with your queen and then he gets in a check, it's like, so it's hard to like defend, but also attack when it's queen and pawn. And with a queen and pawn ending, you want to try and get a passed pawn. But if you have the passed pawn in a queen ending, it's definitely going to be worth more than 9 points. So I don't think it's fluid at different rating levels. I think it depends on the position and how valuable the piece is at that time. So, for example, if two beginners are playing, I've even seen this with adult beginners, like king and queen versus king. A lot of cases in that instance, the queen may not be that valuable if the player with the queen doesn't know how to mate. I've also seen adult beginners as well with king and rook versus king who either didn't know the mate or when they finally got the mate, it took 10 times as long. I mean, we had a situation, I think I mentioned this on the pod. Adult beginner, it was king and rook versus king. I'm watching this game and he couldn't, I'm not laughing at this, I'm laughing with him, no, but he couldn't figure out that with king and rook versus king, you can't do a support mate like you can with the queen, like where the king supports the rook. And then, right, because the king can move from side to side because a rook doesn't control the corners. He wasn't getting this. So I'm watching this game. I'm practically chewing my arm off because I'm like, oh my God, like how do you, I'm like gnawing on my arm watching this. I'm like, it was one of those things. He finally figured it out. Like with king and rook versus king, you kind of have to take the opposition with your king and then mate with a rook, that type of thing, unless it's in the corner. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, but it was pretty wild. So these are things that happen, but it really depends, I think, on, it could be the players, but I think it's more the activity of the piece that would determine the point value and the specific position. But thanks so much, Justin, for your email. We're going to take one more quick break and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. All right, so I want to touch upon the whole idea of these weekend tournaments, especially here in the US, because I know Europe does them a little bit differently, because there's usually just one game a day, which is much more normal. Anyway, FM Nate Solon has been very vocal about the issues with weekend tournaments in the US. I did a whole episode responding to an excellent blog post that Nate wrote, but I kind of wanted to revisit this because my whole thing is what I've been saying on the show is, at some point, I'm probably going to go back to a weekend tournament at some point. Maybe I'll play in a seniors event. But now I'm kind of thinking the opposite. I kind of took a 180. And that's why I titled the episode this. I'm probably not ever going to play. Well, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but I probably, let's stick with the word that I had in the title. I probably will never play in a weekend tournament again, just because I like the club level scene too much. I think there are so many advantages. I'll get to those in a minute. But the more I think about this and the more negative things I hear from other players, the less I want to do it, because the issues that most people talk about with these weekend events, the cost and the time controls and the crazy schedule and, you can't eat lunch and dinner, things like that. I remember that. I mean, last time I played in these major events was maybe 15, 16, 17 years ago, something like that. It's been a while. But here's the funny thing. The problems that I faced back then, they still exist today. Like nothing's changed. What everyone's reporting now when they come back from these tournaments is the same thing I experienced. So I don't know why I'm going to go back to something. And then I went through a phase where I would have a bad experience and, oh, okay, well, this one will be better. This tournament's going to be better. And then I would have another bad experience. Oh, well, let me go back. Well, no, this time it's going to be better. And it just never gets better. So let me go through a few reasons why I'm pretty much going to stick with the weekly club game. So the first thing, it is very cost prohibitive. These weekend tournaments, especially the major ones, like something like the World Open, they're very expensive. I mean, a basic sort of no-name weekend tournament, that could maybe be $150, $160, still a lot of money. But the major events like the World Open, things like that, I mean, those are what, like $300 or more to enter? That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. You have the entry fee, plus you got to pay for the hotel, food, travel. And at my point now, I'm not sharing a room with anybody. Like, sorry, I have to have my own room. I'm too old for that nonsense. Unless I'm like going away with my immediate family, I'm not sharing a hotel room with anybody. That's not happening, right? And then you got food, travel, and the other issue I spoke about this. This is like episode 3 of this podcast or something. We need to stop these ridiculously large cash prizes. Like, why are we having large cash prizes at these tournaments? Because all that does is incentivize cheating and sandbagging. Those large cash prizes, that's going to sort of bring that element of player where all they care about is the prize and the money. Whereas people who just want to play chess, they're going to get hurt by that. So what they should do, lower the prize fund. In other words, when you get rid of these ridiculous cash prizes, you can then lower the prize fund or offer trophies or other physical prizes, which I think is great. Now, I've said this before. Longtime listeners have heard me give this speech. I would love a trophy. Okay, I'm 53. I would love to win a trophy at a chess tournament. Are you kidding me? That would be the coolest thing. Come home, bring it on your shelf. I would love a trophy or some other, like maybe a book signed by, Magnus or something like that. I would love something like that. Right? Whereas, I'm going to win money and I come home, oh, great. My wife's going to be, you're treating us to dinner or something, which is nice too. But it's like cash prizes, that's ephemeral. Whereas something like a trophy or a physical prize, that'll last you forever. And if they had these types of prizes instead, they could lower the entry fees. So it would not be cost prohibitive for many people. They'd probably get more entrants. And that's what they should do. So, but having these, again, these ridiculous large cash prizes, it, in my view, and I'm sure people are going to disagree, but in my view, that almost like lowers the integrity of it being like an amateur chess tournament. Now, I guess people are going to say, well, if they don't have that, people aren't going to show up. But I think if you get rid of the high cash prizes, the people who show up to those, those are the people you want to not show up, right? Because the large cash prizes, again, it attracts potential cheaters and sandbaggers and, other issues as well. So that's one thing. The second reason why I'm probably never going to play in a weekend tournament again is, in my mind, it is kind of selfish in a way, like to be away from your family all weekend to play a board game. I don't know. And then you could say, well, you're just doing it once in a while. I don't know. There's just something like, it just feels weird. Because, during the week it's so busy, and then the weekend should be, for family. Even if you're just running errands together, you're still spending time. But I don't know, there's something, as I'm getting older, there's just something odd about that, especially if you're in a situation where your kids are older and out of the house, that's kind of a different story. But if you still have a house with people in it, and there's just something selfish about being away all weekend. So maybe that's a personal thing. The other thing I don't like about these weekend tournaments, and this kind of goes along with what I just said, they don't allow cell phones to be on or even in the tournament hall. Now, I have a problem with that. I'm surprised there's not more backlash about that. Now, I get it. Cheating is a big concern, with the chess engines on the phones, but, people need to be connected to their homes and their families, or even their jobs. Like certain people, if you're say a doctor, or like maybe a real estate agent, a lawyer, something, there are certain jobs where, it's not just 9 to 5, like you need to be connected. And what if there's a situation at home that needs to be tended to, or something comes up, but your phone is off for 5 hours because you're playing chess, and then you miss some kind of emergency? I have a problem with that. Like I need to be connected, but if my phone's not allowed to be on, and then of course there's this, that could affect your play, because you're like, do I start moving faster because I want the game to be done? Things like that. So that's another issue. Now, along those lines, the other thing that really bothers me, and this is mostly for the Continental Chess Association tournaments. I mean, they do 99% of the tournaments anyway. They don't allow electronic scorekeeping with a device called the Chess Noter. They allow the Manoir or the Ply Counter because those are standalone electronic scorekeepers, but the Chess Noter, I did an episode on that. They repurpose a cell phone for it. That's just how it's created, but you can't cheat on it. There's no engine on it at all. but because it's a repurposed cell phone, they get nervous and they don't allow it. And the reason I have a problem with that is because I use a chess note, or a lot of people do. It saves time, and they're just not allowing it, like, in my opinion, just because of laziness. They don't want to deal with it. Apparently, like, some people were afraid that they were cheating, or because it looks like a cell phone, people think that they have their phone out even though they don't. So they just threw their hands up in the air and say, you know what, we're not going to allow the chess noter. But here's the thing. I almost forgot to say this, the most important point. Chess noter is a U.S. chess approved scorekeeping device. So I don't see how they can ban a device that U.S. chess says you can use for rated tournaments to keep score. That's what bothers me. So I can't have my cell phone to be connected at home. I can't have my chess noter to keep score. Like, seriously? Next reason I'm probably not going to play in these tournaments, and you know, this is the most basic reason. The playing schedule is completely unrealistic. It's not so, I mean, it's 2 games in a day, which is bad enough, right? That it should be 1 game a day, but, or if it's 2 games in a day, it should be a normal time control. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it's 2 games a day with an extremely long time control. I mean, it's just not normal. Like, normal people can't play that much chess in that day. The time controls are too long. And then the games go through lunch hour and dinner hour. It makes no sense. These, like, 40 moves in 2 hours and 30-second increment. What I would do, and I said this before, like what our club does, fine, you want to do 2 games in a day, fine. Because I get it's a little different from Europe, where the tournaments, they don't want them to be like 4 or 5 days. People can't take off work. I get that. But if you want to keep it on a weekend, or maybe if it's a holiday weekend, like a 3-day weekend, like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, you want to do 2 games in a day, do game 90, delay 10, not an increment. Game 90, delay 10. Each game will be about 3 hours, maybe a little bit less. You have the first game at 9 a.m. So let's say it goes to 12 at the most. Bam, that's lunchtime. So you play your morning game, 9 to 12, might probably end earlier. You have lunch, and then start the next game at like 2. You get 2 hours for lunch. Next game is what, 2 to 5, or even started at 2:30. So let's say 2:30 to 5:30. That's your second game. Beautiful. 5:30, 6 o'clock, you have dinner. And not only can you have dinner, you can also have some semblance of an evening. If you just want to relax or chill, if you want to play blitz chess, I wouldn't recommend it, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that would make sense. 2 games a day, game 90, delay 10. Game 1 is at, let's say, 9 o'clock. Game 2 is, let's say, at 2:30, giving you plenty of time to get lunch and dinner and have some semblance of an evening. You want to read, you want to relax, you want to call home, you want to get to bed early. You have that option. So simple. So simple. Make the time controls normal. Anyhow, moving on. Next reason I will probably never play in a weekend tournament again is avoiding tilt. Now, this might be personal for me. I'm curious how many of you can relate. Avoiding tilt with these weekend formats where it's 2 games a day and you're getting in, like, whatever, 4, 5, 6 games, whatever it is. But 2 games a day for, let's say, 3 days in a row or 2 days in a row, maybe 4 days in a row if it's a holiday weekend. That's very, very difficult if you're not playing well. Now, when I say avoiding tilt, I think most people don't know what that is. When you go on tilt, that's when, let's say, you lose a game, or maybe you lose 2 games, and then you start getting frustrated. You don't play in the focused manner that you normally do, and you end up getting in like catch-up mode, like, oh, geez, I just lost a game. I just lost 2 games. I got to get this back. And you end up in sort of like revenge or catch-up mode, and then the moves start coming out quickly and thoughtlessly, and you just play worse. Like, it comes from poker. Like, when a poker player, like, if they lose a really bad hand or a tough hand, they just start playing really poorly and they lose even more chips. It's the same thing in chess. And the reason tilt is very difficult in the weekend format is you don't have any time to recover, especially with the time controls they're using that we mentioned. So you have this crazy loss. It was down to the wire. It was like this 6-hour game, and you're just heartbroken. Or maybe you were winning the whole time and you made this one little slip up, and you have this painful, painful loss. Well, guess what? Your next game is now in 20 minutes. You're telling me that's normal? You're telling me most people, like, you can just blow off all the emotional baggage from that loss and forget about it and just sit down and play a fresh game? That's really difficult. Whereas with your weekly club game, you have a week to shake it off. So if you're tilting in a weekend event, that can be very, very difficult to overcome. Hold on one second. Excuse me. Next thing at these events, there are too many poorly behaved kids. We all know about kids at chess tournaments. Now, you're going to have kids at tournaments, both at the club level and in the major weekend events. But from what I'm hearing, a lot of the kids in the weekend events are just very poorly behaved. It's like those bratty chess kids. And I'm hearing all sorts of stories. I won't go into them now, but it's definitely more of an issue at the weekend tournaments. Now, if you don't like playing kids, that's going to be a problem, because everyone who comes back to the club, because a lot of the guys at the club, they will play in some of these major weekend events and they'll come back and tell me about it. But what I'm hearing is, oh yeah, it was 6 rounds, there were 6 games, and only 2 of my opponents were adults, right? I had 6 games, I had 2 adults, and the other 4 were all under like 10. This is what I'm hearing. At least half their opponents are kids, which is fine, but some people just don't like that. Now, there's playing kids and there's playing kids. The ones who are really bratty and unsportsmanlike, that can drive you crazy. So the last reason why I will likely never play in a weekend event again, there's way, way too many underrated players. Now, we've spoken about this in Rating Deflation. Last week's episode was all about that, right? How there's just so many players with these quote-unquote low ratings who are playing really well. Now, I see it at the club. That is a much, much bigger issue for the weekend events compared to the club scene. But a lot of it also, and I've seen this, you'll get some FIDE or international players who join the events, and they're given like these estimated ratings sometimes that are not very accurate. I don't know if they changed that. That was the last time I played in some of these events. Maybe there's a different rule now, but regardless of that, the whole idea of like, you don't want to play, you're rated 1600 and you're tired of playing these guys rated 800, 1000 who are playing as well or better than you. If that's going to bother you, weekend events are not for you, because this is all I hear, where just the ratings aren't catching up to their strength. And it seems to be worse now than ever before. Which brings us to club events. And why do I like club events so much? There's just a normalcy to it. Like, it just fits into the life of a working adult just so much more easily. I mean, it's still a little bit of a commitment, but it's doable. It's doable. So it's 1 game per week. Obviously, the typical club structure, at least here in the US, they meet 1 night per week. It's usually during the week. It's 1 game. That's it. 1 game. Beautiful. Beautiful. You play your 1 game and you go home, right? You go to work, you come home, you have dinner. Maybe some guys have to come straight from work, whatever it is, but you play your game and you're still home at a decent hour, because most of the time your game is not going to go to the bitter end. Sometimes it will, but most of the games, like our time control is game 90, delay 10. Most of the games within a couple hours are usually done. Maybe 2.5 hours at the most. You'll get a few that go to the full 3 hours, maybe 1 or 2 games, but you can come home at, a fairly decent hour, considering you have to get to work the next day, and it's 1 game. That's like, you get your fix, it's perfect. And again, I mentioned the time control. It's a normal time control. Game 90, delay 10. It's beautiful. It's slow enough that you can play a thoughtful, strategic game, but it's fast enough that you're not there all night and you don't have to give up. You're not coming home at like 2 a.m. The other thing I like about club events, good people, good people. And the people that, aren't so great and ruin it, they generally get weeded out. They will not last. But it's good people, good bunch of guys, still very competitive. But the bottom line, everyone just kind of wants to enjoy themselves, have a good time. And it's this nice like social thing Whereas like the weekend events, it's just so crowded and like so sketchy. Like it's like you can't even find a place to like sit and have a cup of coffee. Whereas, the club scene, it's like a cool thing. Like what we do each week, Dan Levin, who's a good friend of mine, he was on the pod, he usually has a position of the week. So while we're setting up and stuff, he'll set up, it'll be like a puzzle type position. Like it'll be, white to move and draw, white to move and win. And then the guys discuss it. It's like a cool social thing. You just don't get that sort of camaraderie at the major weekend events. The other advantage with club events, it's generally for most people close to home, at least closer to than most of these major weekend events. So it's close to home. It's less of a footprint on your schedule as far as commuting and stuff and as far as cost. Now, yes, we do have players who travel an hour or more each way to get here because there isn't a club by them further east in Suffolk. We're a little bit further west, our club, which is still a lot, but at least, it's doable. It's not like if you're going to one of these away weekend tournaments where you got to drive like, 4 or 5 hours to get there. But for most people, it's a relatively painless commute, maybe 20 minutes or less. And as I said, as a result, it's not too much of a footprint on their schedule. They can work it out with their family so that they can get out once a week. And the other thing I like about the club event, this is just sort of more of a chess psychology thing. It's a more level playing field. Like you just have a kind of a more even chance to win. I mean, what do I mean by that? It's during the week, it's at night. And remember, there's never an ideal time to play chess. When you're working and you have a job, which is most of us, right? There's never going to be a good time to play chess. If it's at night during the week for the club level, everyone's tired, it's after work. If it's on the weekend for one of these major events, it's all the reasons I mentioned earlier that you got to deal with. So you're never going to be playing with a full tank of gas. That's just how it is. But with the club level, it's at night, everyone's tired, it's after work. There's a chance your opponent might blunder or that you might, it's just a little more level playing field. Whereas for these weekend tournaments, everyone seems to be more in their A game. It just seems to be a little bit more intense because, everyone's a little more relaxed or in a hotel. I mean, not always because it's such a long time control, but I guess I'm not explaining this that well. I guess there's just something about playing at the club level where I think both players just have a decent chance of winning. I guess I'll put it that way, just because of the logistics. So just to wrap this up, I just think club events in general are just the way to go, assuming you're a working adult with a family and other responsibilities. And because things really haven't changed based on anecdotal evidence with these weekend tournaments, I'm probably never going to go back. I was considering doing it. I know they have, maybe some senior tournaments out there. I mean, if they have a senior tournament where it's a 1 game a day type thing, maybe I'll do that. But most of these mainstream weekend tournaments, I just don't see it happening for myself for the reasons I outlined above. So anyhow, thank you for indulging me with this One Take podcast. It felt to me like it came out okay. I hope it did for you as well. Really appreciate you listening. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.